The stories presented in this video are real, but we have changed the characters' names and altered images to protect their identities. The creator of this video is not an investigative officer. These narratives have been sourced from various internet platforms. Our intent is not to accuse or target anyone in particular. Thank you for understanding.
Welcome to True Crime Stories Hub. In today's true crime documentary, we uncover the shocking tale of a husband's deadly secret exposed and the devastating marriage betrayal story that led to murder. Stay tuned as we dive into this tragic case of deceit and destruction. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more chilling stories. The life of 17-year-old Lily Donovan took a turn for the worst at the beginning of 2011. Samantha Matthews, a 19-year-old cheerleader who seemed to have it all, bullied her non-stop at school. She stood out for her popularity, influence, and cruel nature. Samantha's cruelty was both overt and covert. She would knock Lily's books out of her hands, push her in the halls, and disseminate untruths that further distanced her from her peers. Lily made a vain attempt to stay away from Samantha. Samantha's methods went beyond simple verbal assault. They included psychological manipulation. She would make Lily the laughingstock of their little high school by humiliating her in public. Lily's mental state started to worsen. Despite being aware of the bullying, the school did nothing to stop the isolation, which got intolerable. Her peers were either unconcerned about Lily's misery or too terrified of Samantha, and the teachers chose to ignore it. Lily soon came to feel as though she had no one to turn to. No one but Mark, her father. Lily ultimately lost it one evening in late February 2011. In the hopes of finding a solution, she told Mark everything. She described how Samantha harassed her every day and how there was no way out. Mark, 43, who had always shielded his daughter, had a wave of remorse and rage. Since his wife's passing, he had been so preoccupied with making ends meet and maintaining order that he had failed to recognize Lily's extreme hardship. Mark intended to confront the cheerleader personally since he was determined to stop Samantha's actions. Mark waited outside the school on March 1, 2011, following one of Samantha's cheering practices. In an attempt to negotiate with Samantha, he went up to her and asked her to stop harassing Lily. However, that discussion didn't proceed as expected. Samantha, who never hesitates to take advantage of a situation, sensed an opening in Mark's worry. She saw his seeming desperation and vulnerability. A heated discussion quickly turned into one that was more deceptive. Knowing how attractive and powerful she was, Samantha first flirted with Mark in a subtle way before things became more intense. She was skilled at manipulating people's feelings, particularly those of an innocent person like Mark. Before long, he was caught in her trap. A father's attempt to safeguard his daughter swiftly turned into an affair. The affair intensified in the weeks that followed, from March to May 2011. Behind closed doors, it became their secret. Mark, who was already struggling with loneliness, was pulled further into Samantha's deceptive grasp. He persuaded himself that it was necessary for him to get out of the void he had been experiencing for so long. He initially convinced himself that it was innocuous and that nobody would ever discover it. Samantha, however, wasn't merely taking advantage of him. She took great pleasure in her dominance over him. The harassment of Lily only got worse as the encounter progressed. Samantha's covert friendship with Mark gave her the confidence to be more vicious at school. She viewed Lily's pain as a game, and Mark's involvement with her decreased his attention to his daughter. Lily would make an effort to talk to him and share the fresh suffering she was going through at Samantha's hands. However, Mark dismissed her worries. He began to brush off Lily's grievances as being overblown, possibly even seeking for ways to steer clear of the subject entirely. Samantha's impact was greater than the guilt. Meanwhile, Lily observed minor adjustments at home. It began with the sudden changes in her father's mood. The rushed treks out of the house, the late-night phone conversations, and his absences didn't match up. Although she was unable to fully piece it together, Lily started to feel something was badly off by the middle of May 2011. Once merely a school nightmare, Samantha started to bother Lily at home as well. Although Samantha would pretend to be there for study sessions or to drop by after practice, Lily could tell something wasn't right. Her tormentor was now a frequent guest at their house, showing off her dominance over Lily's personal space and academic life. Samantha gained confidence and began going to Mark's place more frequently. Every time she came in, she exuded an eerie sense of authority. For his part, Mark didn't see it. Too involved and too far gone to realize what it was doing to Lily. Samantha had made it a habit to stop by in the evenings by the end of May, occasionally staying up late. Hearing footsteps and whispered whispers, Lily became more nervous and started to piece things together. Even her father didn't seem to care that her world was falling apart. Samantha's power over Mark was evident at this point. He no longer stood up for Lily at all, becoming more away every day. By June, the rifts in their family life were widening, and Samantha's frequent and brash visits to their house were practically an admission of her dominance over both father and daughter. Everything would eventually come crashing down. Everything in Lily Donovan's world fell apart on May 15, 2011. 4 months, she had endured Samantha's constant bullying at school in silence, with neither consolation nor safety from her father, Mark. Depleted of emotions and growing more and more detached from her intimate relationship with him, she made the decision to use his phone in an attempt to learn more about his recent actions. Instead, she discovered intimate text exchanges between Samantha and Mark. She scanned through them with trembling hands, each message more damning than the one before it. The realization struck her like a ton of bricks. The same person who tortured her every day was having an affair with her father. Lily felt totally deceived in that moment. Her voice breaking, she addressed Mark and wanted to know how he could betray her so cruelly and do this to her. However, Mark betrayed her rather than feeling guilty or ashamed. Instead of taking responsibility for his actions, he blamed her for violating his privacy. His rage came suddenly and without warning. Disregarding Lily's suffering completely, he grounded her for looking through his phone. Mark's response was a blatant indication that his judgment had been impaired by his relationship with Samantha. Mark didn't conceal the affair after that. In order to show off their love to Lily, he instead permitted Samantha to come to their house more often. For her, it turned into a kind of psychological punishment. Every time Samantha walked into their house, Lily experienced a new round of suffering. Once her haven, her house was now a battleground where she felt helpless and alone. Samantha, on the other hand, relished her newfound authority over both her daughter and father. She would give Lily patronizing glances that made her realize who was actually in charge while sitting idly in the kitchen or living room, behaving as though she belonged there. The issue had gotten out of hand by the beginning of June. Lily made the decision on June 10, 2011, that she could no longer put up with the ongoing humiliation. She bravely called Samantha's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Matthews, in desperation for assistance. She revealed the affair by describing how their daughter was controlling her father in addition to bullying her. The Matthews acted right away after being appalled by the scandalous nature of the situation. They were aware that their family's reputation in their small, tight-knit town would be ruined if the affair were made public. They were a powerful and well-respected family, and any suggestion of improper behavior could destroy them. They went up to Samantha and told her how angry and disappointed they were. In order to keep her out of trouble, the Matthews threatened to send her away to college unless she ended her relationship with Mark right away. She received severe warnings from them. She was never allowed to see or talk to Mark again. They wanted to keep things under control before they turned into a major controversy. But Samantha's response wasn't what they had anticipated. She became angry rather than comply with their requests. She held Lily responsible for all the mishaps. The only person she currently cared about, Mark, had been destroyed because of Lily, she believed. The idea of losing command over him just made her bitterness worse. Since Lily was the only thing standing between her and Mark's ongoing romance, she became obsessed with her. Samantha's rage grew over the next few days. She came up with a strategy to deal with Lily permanently by June 20th, 2011. Samantha persuaded herself that killing Lily was the only way to take back her life and keep Mark to herself. She was aware that things would return to normal if Lily disappeared. She devised a straightforward but lethal scheme. Under the guise of wanting to make amends, she would entice Lily to a remote area. As clever as ever, Samantha staged the meeting with the assistance of several of her cheerleader friends, presenting it as a sophisticated practical joke that would frighten Lily. Unaware of Samantha's entire scheme, the buddies consented to assist. They were blind to the darkness simmering underneath Samantha's exterior. They saw it as all part of the fun, a high adrenaline game that would make Lily look foolish. Samantha, however, took it much more seriously. She knew just what she was going to do. Implementation of the plan began on June 25, 2011. Samantha pretended to be a kind person that evening when she messaged Lily, inviting her to meet in an abandoned building on the outskirts of town. Lily consented, still feeling vulnerable and hoping for a solution. Perhaps, she reasoned, Samantha might wish to put things right. She was unaware that it was a trap. There was tension in the air when Lily got there that evening. Long shadows were thrown in the waning daylight by the ancient, deserted edifice that towered over her. Few people ever went inside the structure, which was previously a factory and was remote from the main roadways. Samantha and her friends were waiting as soon as Lily entered. The appearance of reconciliation first covered up the tension, but Samantha's actual motivations soon became apparent. She became so enraged that she blamed Lily of wrecking her life, her relationship with Mark, and everything. Before anybody could intervene, Samantha launched an attack as the altercation swiftly got out of hand. She picked up a blunt object, a metal pipe that had been resting in the room's corner, and slammed it at Lily. Everyone was surprised by the initial punch, but Samantha persisted. Her fury prevented her from seeing the tragedy that was happening all around her, so she kept hitting Lily. Fearful and helpless, Lily collapsed to the ground, and her life was gone in a matter of minutes. When the friends who had rushed to Samantha's aid realized what had transpired, they were frightened and left the area. This was the last thing they had planned on happening. After being left alone with Lily's dead body, Samantha came to terms with the seriousness of her actions. She gazed around the room, the silence deafening, and panic set in. Samantha left Lily's body in the deserted building, hoping that no one would discover it for some time, as she had no idea what she was going to do next. Desperate to get away from the crime, she fled into the darkness. The murder had been committed, but the fallout was far from over. For most residents of the town, the morning of June 26, 2011, began like any other day, but it would quickly become a memorable one. Taking a shortcut through the deserted building, a bystander discovered something that instantly chilled them: a person laying still in the dark corner of the structure. Lily Donovan was the one. Her lifeless body, encircled by signs of a violent altercation, was instantly identified as the scene of a grave offense. Without wasting any time, the bystander called the police, who secured the area in a matter of minutes. Investigators soon noticed evidence of foul play. Lily had been brutally attacked, as evidenced by the blood found at the site and the numerous blunt force injuries she had to her skull. Normally abandoned, the building now became the focus of local authorities' attention. The inquiry was put in the hands of Detective Emmanuel Owens, who is renowned for his keen intuition and painstaking attention to detail. He had a sneaking suspicion that this was more than a haphazard act of violence. This was not a random attack, as evidenced by the personal nature of the injuries and the absence of forced entrance. But the case was complicated because there was not much tangible evidence at the site. No recognizable fingerprints, no visible murder weapon, and no unambiguous witnesses were found. The police were aware that identifying the perpetrator of such a heinous act would need extensive investigation. Detective Owens started his investigation by interviewing Lily's closest friends and family members as the days went by. He began by speaking with Lily's father, Mark Donovan, who was obviously heartbroken by the death of his daughter. Mark described the bullying Lily had been experiencing at school and named Samantha Matthews as the primary offender. This was an important lead, but as the interview went on, Owens saw that Mark was acting inconsistently. There was something strange about his anguish, but it looked genuine. His responses lacked spontaneity or were overly practiced. The cops collected Mark and Lily's phone records in an attempt to learn more. Before long, they discovered a startling fact. Samantha, the same girl who had been harassing his daughter, was the object of Mark's covert affair. The disclosure gave the case a new perspective. In addition to failing to shield Lily from her abuser, Mark had also developed a close relationship with her. Everything was compounded by this affair, and Detective Owens soon recognized that this twisted dynamic could be linked to the crime. Owens carried on with his interviews, concentrating on Samantha and her pals this time. Despite being disturbed, Samantha insisted she was innocent and had nothing to do with Lily's passing. But one of Samantha's friends began to lose it when things got tough. According to the acquaintance, the gang had planned what they believed to be a practical joke to frighten Lily, but things swiftly got out of hand. Key evidence for the inquiry came from this testimony, as well as phone logs that revealed Samantha's chats with her pals the day of the murder. The evidence against Samantha was overwhelming. By July 5th, armed with sufficient evidence, Detective Owens issued an arrest order for Samantha. Samantha was accused of murder in the first degree. Desperate to keep their family's reputation intact, her parents tried to control the story right away. In an attempt to hide the specifics of the murder and the affair from the public, they engaged well-known lawyers. Still, the matter was already in the news. The tragic death of his daughter and the affair between a 43-year-old dad and a 19-year-old cheerleader turned into the year's biggest scandal. The neighborhood was outraged by Samantha's arrest. Some saw her as a violent and manipulative person who had purposefully planned to kill Lily, while others saw her as a troubled young woman who had made a number of poor choices. Meanwhile, Mark was ridiculed by the public. The community held him accountable for his association with Samantha and his failure to safeguard his daughter, even though he had not been personally involved in the murder. His image was in shambles. Officially, the trial started on July 15, 2011. Reporters and residents crowded the courtroom, curious to learn more about Samantha and Mark's relationship and how it resulted in Lily's untimely death. While Samantha's friends, who had very minor participation in the conspiracy, were prosecuted as accomplices, Samantha was charged with first-degree murder. The case made by the prosecution was strong. They outlined the sequence of events, demonstrating how Samantha had deceitfully enticed Lily to the deserted building with the goal of hurting her. Their case relied heavily on witness testimony and phone data. To support their claim that this was a premeditated murder, they also presented forensic evidence linking Samantha to the scene of the crime. Mark had a complicated role in the trial. He ought to have pursued justice for his daughter's death as Lily's father. However, his involvement with Samantha tarnished his reputation. He disclosed the affair's specifics when he testified, expressing his profound regret for the way his actions had caused Lily's passing. Although he acknowledged that Samantha had deceived him, the harm had already been done. He was seen with a mix of sympathy and indignation by the jury and the general public. According to his evidence, he had lost control of his life and had become oblivious to his daughter's suffering as a result of his affair. On August 20, 2011, following weeks of testimony and growing evidence, the jury returned a verdict. First-degree murder was the verdict Samantha Matthews received. Given the seriousness of the offense and Samantha's lack of regret, the judge gave her a life sentence without the chance of release. Although the trial was over, the case's effects would last for years. Despite not being directly involved in the murder, Samantha's companions received reduced sentences for their roles in the crime. Despite having no criminal charges against him, Mark Donovan was unable to avoid the repercussions of his behavior. The community could not forgive him because his affair with Samantha had set off the whole chain of events. Lily's surviving family members filed civil cases against him, and the media persisted in pressuring him for interviews. Once a well-respected single father, his life had utterly fallen apart. Shortly after the trial, Mark decided to leave town since he could no longer stand the shame and the public's contempt. Moving away was the only way he could start to reconstruct what was left of his broken life, but he would never be able to completely escape the shadow of what had transpired. Mark Donovan and Samantha Matthews' sad story serves as a sobering reminder of how deceit, deception, and unbridled appetites may lead to anarchy. A family was ruined, and an early death resulted from the effects of secrecy and neglect. In a more tragic instance, however, a narcissistic stepfather mistreats a teenage daughter, and the mother retaliates. You're going to be furious about this case. Remember to subscribe, like, and definitely check out that case.